Welcome to Insights into Success. We're with your host Paul Dodds. We hope to educate, inspire and motivate you to achieve your own personal success. We talk to guests from all around the world from a variety of walks of life to hear the realities of their own journey to success. What challenges have they faced? How have they coped with failure? And what have been the keys or will be the keys to their own success? In our Read to Succeed interviews, we talk books that have inspired our guests, and for some, they share their secrets to marketing success. Join us as we give you insights into success. So welcome back to Insights into Success, where today we're talking to our special guest, Karl Swanepol, about Read to Succeed. Now, from what I understand, Karl likes to read much like myself, so I'm going to hand it over to Karl, and he's going to share some of the books that he's read and why he's chosen them, what's inspired him about them. So take it away, Karl.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me again, Paul. I have three initial ones written down, all three books, which I think had some kind of impact in me, all in different ways. The first one is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters, which is kind of all about startups, and it's kind of a handbook on how to create, the next great big startups, full of great learnings, from serial entrepreneur Peter Thiel, who's also been exposed to many other very successful entrepreneurs over the years.
Yeah.
Then the second one I have is Power by Dr. Jeffrey Pfeffer. Dr. Jeffrey Pfeffer is a professor of organizational behavior at Stanford University in California. And this is a very interesting book. I think probably less, in many ways, very relevant to an entrepreneur, but I'd say even more sort of relevant to somebody looking to work up the corporate ladder in a large company. There are lots of very interesting sort of findings from that. And then the third one that I chose is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. This is probably the one I have the most kind of mixed feelings about, because I think there are, when I read it the first time, I was kind of quite disgusted by it. I think it's sort of written in a very particular way. I think kind of have some shock value. But going back and rereading it and having more time to think about it, I think there are certainly some useful lessons in there as well.
So I've not heard of that book. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure. So essentially, the 48 Laws of Power is, as the name kind of suggests, it's kind of 48 rules which the author has kind of pieced together from lots of different historical events on how to kind of gain and maintain power. And some of the laws are really just kind of I think very kind of underhanded. So for example, one of them is let others do the work, but always take the credit. There are lots of other ones like, conceal your intentions. I mean, but I think if you kind of look beyond maybe some of the shock value, and there is there is certainly a lot of things in that book that I don't think anyone should do, but I think certainly good to be aware of, sort of looking at politicians, looking at powerful people in general, and being able to spot some of these things that are being done. But I think then there are some useful things in there kind of for yourself as well. So, for example, the first law is never outshine the master. And there the author uses an example from, I believe, 1700s France, where King Louis, I can't remember how many, I think. Yeah, well, one of the King Louis, essentially his finance minister wanted to become the next prime minister. And the way he went about doing that is by throwing a massive party at his palace. He invited lots of, very sort of successful and powerful people, all to try and make a good impression on the king, to sort of show how wealthy he is, how well connected he is, and so on. And then essentially what happened after this party is that King Louis threw him into jail, and I think he eventually got executed as well, for sort of embezzling funds or something. But it was kind of a made up thing. I mean, ultimately the lesson is that the king felt threatened by this guy's kind of big display of wealth and power and so on. And then chose to deal with him. And I think this lesson can be very useful if you are working for somebody. So, for example, if you have a boss at work, just making sure. I think it depends obviously on the person you're dealing with, but just kind of being aware that sometimes the way you can make a best impression is not by, or if you're really showing all of your abilities and laying all the cards on the table, it can make people above you feel threatened. I think that's the key takeaway there.
Yeah, I think being mindful of other people's egos. You're not being careful, particularly if they're higher up the hierarchy than you in the organization, then being careful not to trample over your superiors' egos in your quest for going up the ladder, as it were. So tell me, how did you get onto these books? I'm intrigued to know, because the first one I've heard of and I've read, but the other two I've not heard of. But always interested to know where people, get their inspirations for the books that they read from.
Sure. So, three kind of very different ways. The first one, 0 to 1, I bought at in an airport shop at a kind of a layover. I was just looking at the business section. I recognized the name Peter Thiel, and I thought, this might be interesting. So I bought that. Then Power is a book that my mom actually recommended. She read it before going for a job interview alongside a very important job interview alongside a bunch of other books. And then the 48 Laws of Power, I think I got exposed to that through YouTube, actually, by sort of people mentioning it on there, and also hearing that this book is banned in a lot of prisons. And I don't know how many books are necessarily banned in prisons. I genuinely don't know, but I would have thought probably not that many. So that also kind of caught my curiosity, and then I looked more into that too.
So with that last book, what do you think the intention was of the author? Do you think they set out to be controversial when writing the book?
Without a doubt. It's written probably. I don't know if you could sort of write it in a more controversial way, to be honest.
Right.
I think that's a very big part of it. But I think what makes that book particularly useful is like I said, just being able to, being able to spot when other people are doing these kind of things and defending against them. Because if you have no conscience, no morals, and you follow this book kind of to the letter, I think you can go very far. But certainly very much at the expense of other people. So I think, like I say, there are a handful of things in that book that are very useful. There's another one as well, a law called Enter Action with Boldness, where essentially the author talks about Christopher Columbus, who was the son of I believe his father owned a wine shop or something. But anyway, they weren't sort of particularly well off. But Christopher Columbus wanted to fund his journeys, his kind of expeditions. And so what he did is he started essentially pretending that he was some kind of Italian aristocrat. He then went to the Portuguese royal family, and if you're kind of going to somebody asking for a lot of money, a lot of resources, multiple ships, crews, everything you need, and what are you going to give them in return? I think most people would probably ask quite politely, whereas what Christopher Columbus did is he sort of showed up and made a bunch of demands. So he said that he needs all of these resources. He needs to get the title Grand Admiral of the Oceanic Seas. He needs to become viceroy of all the territories he discovers, and him and his family in perpetuity need to get 10% of all of the sort of revenues generated by these places that he's discovered.
Yeah.
And then the Portuguese royal family turned him down. But, because he had made these crazy demands, the thought is either he's completely insane or he's worth it. And the king didn't think that he was insane. So, he thought, oh, this guy must be worth it. And then essentially he went and did the same thing on the Spanish royal family. And then they ended up going for it. And they honored all of his demands except for the 10% of revenues from the provinces he discovered. But they honored all of the other crazy demands that he made. And actually, if he hadn't made those demands, they might have been less likely to agree in the first place, because by presenting himself in that way, it comes across as if he's worth it to be making such insane demands.
Yeah. So he bluffed his way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot to be said for being highly confident like this. Interesting, isn't it?
Very. Yeah, it's extremely interesting. There are a lot of things in that book that kind of changed the way I think. I'd highly recommend and anybody to read it. But I think if you have some morals, it'll probably disgust you a lot the first time reading it. It certainly did for me. But now I can kind of look at it as, for what it is.
Yeah. And so for you, in terms of your reading, do you have a particular type of book that you like to read?
Not really. I mean, I kind of like I like reading books that I believe will be useful to me in some way. So that's predominantly non-fiction books. But then, inside of that, I'm interested in, all sorts of different things. So, I'd say mainly coming down to kind of entrepreneurship and psychology, I'd say, are probably the two main areas.
And how often do you read?
I mean, nowadays, certainly not as much as I should. When I was a bit younger, a lot more. I've also found that audiobooks work a lot better for me, because I can kind of pair it up with going for a long walk or something like that. Kind of, I find that I can concentrate best when I'm doing something else as well, such as going for a walk, let's say. But yeah, not as much as I should do nowadays.
So it's interesting you're talking about audiobooks. So for you, from what I'm gathering, you don't really have issues with retention with an audiobook.
No. And in fact, I think I probably retain more. I mean, all of these. No, in fact, 0 to 1 and Power by Dr. Jeffrey Pfeffer, those two I read the physical book of, but with the 48 Laws of Power was an audiobook the 2 times I read it, or listened to it, I suppose. But I think ultimately I retain the information. I retain more from an audiobook.
That's interesting. I mean, for me, I'm the exact opposite. I would definitely retain more from a physical book than an audiobook. Somehow I seem to find it hard to concentrate and drift off with my thoughts sometimes in other directions.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm the exact other way around. But I think it just depends from person to person.
Absolutely. And so for you, when you listen to audiobook, do you listen to it at normal speed, or do you listen to it at 1.5 times or 2 times, like I've heard some people do?
No, I listen to it at normal speed, and then pair it up with kind of going for a walk or something. I'm sure I could listen to it faster, but I don't know. I haven't tried it. Maybe I should try it and then see.
Yes, no, it's interesting talking to different people. Some people swear by, listening to it at 1.5 times. Other people have talked about actually reading the book and listening to the audio at the same time and finding that very good. But I'm not sure if I could do that one. But it's like you said, it's very much an individual thing, and it's just interesting the different approaches people have. So for you, outside of the audio book, and obviously you've alluded to that you read a physical book, do you read much at all in the way using a Kobo or Kindle as well?
No, actually, I've never owned either. I mean, for me, it's really only been kind of audiobooks and physical books. I mean, I have a couple behind me there. I have Power by Jeffrey Pfeffer, 0 to 1, and Homo Deus as well by Yuval Noah Harari, which it's another book I really like.
And so for you, if I was to, borrow one of your books, what would it look like? Would it have highlights through it, notes through it, sticky bits of paper, or would it be nice and perfectly clean?
It wouldn't have notes or highlights in, but it would probably, wouldn't be in the best condition. I know there are lots of people who, kind of want to be very careful not to put a crease in the spine or things like that. That's not something I particularly look out for personally.
But you're not in the habit of highlighting or marking up things in a book.
No, if I want to take notes, I sort of take notes in a separate notebook.
Yeah, I guess that was going to be my next question: is do you have a strategy for retention of what you read?
Well, I mean, if there's something that really impacts me, I tend to write it down. But then again, if there's something that really impacts me, I also just tend to remember it. So yeah, I'd say a combination of the two. But I think I have no idea who said this, but I once heard that somebody say that essentially, even if if, let's say you read a book 10 years ago, even if you can't sort of name a single thing that happened in the book, let's say, but the book has changed the way you think, then that's still worth it. And I think that's a lot of what reading comes down to. I mean, realistically, we don't sort of, or at least I don't, maybe some people do, but, kind of remember, could like recite a whole page or something, or even necessarily recite all of the main sort of themes or topics of the book. But the important thing is just the subconscious kind of change to the way that we think, without necessarily, being able to name exactly how that has happened. I think that's very key as well.
Yeah, it always impresses me when you hear these people start quoting from the books, and I'm like, how are they doing that? Are they reading them several times? Are they using a highlighter, or what are they doing? Because I can't.
I don't know. I think I think it depends. Some people have a better memory for it. Some people probably specifically memorize particular quotes to come across that way. I don't know. But I couldn't sort of verbatim just remember, a whole book sort of front to back, no way.
Yeah, no, same. So for you, like, just to sort of qualify this a little bit further, I mean, would you read one book a month, or what do you think you would read a month?
Ideally, I'd like to read one book a month. I don't at the moment, but, I think that would be a good amount. I think the other thing is it's the same thing with habits, for example. I mean, I'm sure everyone can think of 100 great habits that, given enough time to think about it, but could come up with 100 great habits that they would like to implement. But if you sort of try and implement them all at once, it's not going to work, or even 10, it's not going to work. So I think what's important is to kind of, read a book, have some time to think about it, especially if it's like, the kind of books I like a nonfiction book, actually try and implement some of the lessons in real life, and then sort of, getting that to stick before you then move on to the next one. So I think, like one a month would probably be a good length of time to do that.
Yeah. And I think, from what you're saying, it's more about taking in the lessons from the book and absorbing them, putting them into practice, as opposed to being on a mission to just read an X number of books in a year and possibly not take them all in quite the same.
Yes, absolutely. For me, it's all about kind of the value output rather than the, amount input.
Yeah, no, exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much, Karl. It was good to talk to you again. I personally love reading. I don't read as much as I like to either at times, unfortunately. You get sidetracked with other things. But, reading it's just a great way to learn from other people and fast track you down your journey in life by, having the lessons of others shared with you. So I like just to do this Read to Succeed to help inspire and encourage people to read. And what will happen from here is that we will put the list of your books on my segment on my website, where we use Goodreads, and they provide a book review. And just so really over the time, I'm not sure how many books we've got, but we've got a real diversity, a real collection of books from all the different guests. And hopefully for people when they go and visit the site there, they've got lots to choose from, and hopefully it's all pretty inspiring. So thank you so much, Karl, for your sharing and being part of that with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's been a lot of fun, and well, you've inspired me to start reading more again.
Yeah, well, you can always go check out the list and see what some of the other guests have said, because it's really quite diverse. And if it wasn't for doing this, there's a lot of books I would not have known about and would not have read or planned to read. So it's a great way to get some inspiration on what to read next.